Mr. Joe Bark, welcome to the Passion Project. Dude,
thanks for having me.
Dude, so stoked to have you here. Yeah. You've been on the list since the get-go because I love telling stories or getting stories from people that I've either known a long time or I've always looked up to, and you are definitely one of the people I've known for a long time and I've always looked up to, and your story is amazing, and we're gonna share it all today, which is gonna be really fun.
Glad to be here, and the story goes way back for hundreds and hundreds of paddlers putting it together.
More than
thousands and thousands of paddlers.
Well, and I always say I always preempt it saying this is not a paddling podcast. It's not a master craftsman podcast, even though I have a lot of people like that in here. It really is a storytelling podcast. And my hope is, as I always say, that even people that know you super well hear this and go, oh, I didn't know that about Joe. That's kind of the fun part, right? And I think that you and my relationship with you starts with boards 25 years ago till now, but there's a big story of like what got you into board building and all your career stuff. And like, I think I know where you grew up, but I don't know the story about it. So that's going to be the fun part for me. And I think for other people as well, just go, oh, I see the formative stuff that got Joe into this place, which is now, if you've ever touched a prone paddleboard in your life, which is paddling on your belly for those that don't know, or on your knees, most boards in the world have this guy's name on it. Bark Boards, Joe Bark, and we're going to talk all about the board building and the racing and the Catalina Classic, but we're also going to talk about, again, upbringing in your career and your family and all those things that make you who you are. Is that cool?
Sounds good. Yep.
Rad. Well, before we start, just a couple little more intros. So I mentioned board builder, but you've got a big, like, of anybody I think of that's like a perpetual busy guy. Like I remember you're in the board shaping bay at 4 a.m, and then you're a firefighter, and then you're like, I don't know if you ever slept. So we're gonna find out how you managed all of that stuff. But Joe also is known as like a community builder in the paddling world, always the guy making it fun and putting on events and getting people together and cooking for everybody. And it's one of the lovely things about you. And I think it's a big part of the reason that the community is so strong is because of you kind of as the glue or the mortar, which has been what I've seen for the last 25 years, which is rad. And then again, then there's the board building and the elite level of people that are racing your boards every year. And, again, like 90% of people that paddle prone boards, they're paddling one with your name on it, which is an incredible from a sport perspective. Like you just don't see that. It's like if everybody was playing with one kind of tennis racket, it just doesn't happen. So super, super cool. So enough of my intro, super excited to dig into this. And I thought we would start and kind of go chronologically. I know where you live and we'll talk about it, but can you tell us, like, where'd you grow up? What was that like? Because it's going to inform us where you are today.
Born in back apartment at my grandparents' house, Manhattan Beach.
Okay.
Then went to Voorhees, Redondo, then to Palos Verdes, then to Hawaii in 1969. Well, I was 5th grade, so I was 10.
Oh, hold on. Okay, I'm going to slow it down a little bit. I knew you were in Hawaii at one point, but I thought that was much later in life. So you were born you've been South Bay for the better part of your whole life. Okay.
Yeah.
So you were born there. Let's talk about your parents real quick. And you were born in your grandparents' house? Is that what you said?
They had an apartment behind their house at 121 Manhattan, 13th Street, where we used to have the little parties after the Catalina in the early days when there was 20 or 30 of us right there on the, put all the boards there and have fun.
See, already we're talking stories that I wasn't aware of, and I look forward to uncovering more about that. So you're born there, you grow up there, and then you just mentioned, well, let's talk about your folks. Like, what brought your family to South Bay? Do you know?
My dad was a water polo coach, swim coach at Maricosta High School.
Oh.
And he was a teacher there. And then summertime, he would run called the Rossler Pool, which is now the beach club up there in Palos Verdes. And then he would also run at the Palos Verdes High School, the pool. He'd run the 2 pools for the summer. And he'd hire all his teacher friends or buddies to run it and do the swimming lessons and all that stuff. And so we were South Bay. I was born in Manhattan, but that was quick. I outgrew that apartment real quick. And then Redondo Beach, then Palos Verdes. And at I was 5th grade, so 9 turning 10, went to Oahu for my dad took a sabbatical leave from teaching, and went there, then moved back at the next year. And
so you just
continued.
went, Dad took a 1-year sabbatical. You guys went to Hawaii.
Yeah.
So 2 questions based on what you just shared. Pool and water polo coach and Hawaii. I'm guessing those are pretty influential things in your life of being a waterman for the last 50 plus years, right?
Yeah, without knowing it, I don't think we had a choice. But those were the sports for me anyways.
But so the pool was a big part. Was the ocean a big part growing up?
Oh yeah, the ocean was a big part. We'd go down and as kids, and back then it was not boogie boarding, it was surf mats, before the boogie boards and kickboards, and we'd body surf, and then I was knee boarding first, and then surfing, and then didn't really paddle till later on when I was like 16.
In high school.
Yeah, on longboards, except for junior lifeguards, which was such a good program today, but it was really good back then as well. And a lot of kids really thrive on junior lifeguards and love it. Other guys do it because they kind of have to because they're
Sure.
parents, and then bail out as soon as they can. But
So you grew up the full Southern California lifestyle. You grew up at the beach, in the pool. Parents were totally into it, was what it sounds like. I mean, Dad being a coach. So that was kind of the where you guys went as a family? Or were you doing this kind of on your own with your
no, it
buddies?
was family. We were young. We'd go down there, and all our friends' parents, we'd go down, and we'd do the full-on surf matting and body surfing, and just being kids, lay in the sand, eating cold grapes, and but just being a kid in California.
Got it. Okay. And then you were mentioning, and then Hawaii. What do you remember? You were young, and it was just 1 year. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I remember. It was a really neat house right on the water, and no surf in front, and we dove a lot, and then we would paddle our boards, which back then were like 8 and 9 feet, down about a mile to a tiny little surf spot for kids, and now they foil it a bunch, but it's called Kahana Bay. And so we'd paddle down there, and sometimes my dad would show up and pick us up. Other times, if he didn't, we'd paddle back. We'd paddle right next to shore, because the reef's way outside. And so you're just paddling through the right next to shore zone and scraping your knuckles on the rocks and reef and pulling fins out. But really fun for a kid to surf there because it was like knee to waist high and warm water and pretty cool.
Got it. Well, you talk about all these things, paddling and diving and surfing, and like all of a sudden you're like, oh yeah, haven't changed a whole lot since then to some degree, right?
No, that was the good days.
So cool. So you come back, and you said you went to high school in Redondo?
No, went to high school in Palos Verdes.
Oh, up in PV.
And played water polo and swam.
Okay. Now, PV, talk about growing up there, because I always say 2 things. One, I'm sure growing up back then, you're in LA, but you're not in LA. Like it's its own island when you're up on the hill. And 2, I always say, I get lost every time I drive up there, every single time. I cannot figure that place out. But it's also known for incredible beaches and reefs and paddling and surfing and diving. I'm guessing you grew up doing a lot of that there.
Yeah, we were diving from way back, my brothers and friends. And back then it was just, small local fish, and it has some of the best white sea bass diving anywhere. And we got yellowtail certain times of the year, a lot of halibut and lobster, and a lot of trails. And but back then there was a lot of space. Like you could disappear for the day, chase lizards and snakes, and come home at dark. And there was no development up on top, and in the late 60s and early 70s, pretty cool. Like you thought you were going to see Indians and cowboys come over the hill or something. It was pretty cool. And now it's pretty much developed with a few lots here and there, but it was very vacant back then. And going down the cliffs was pretty cool, in the tide pools, and it was pretty neat.
Yeah, I can only imagine. And I suspect that because in those times, everything was pretty safe. Like go play, go kids, go on your own and come back when it gets dark.
Oh,
right?
Yeah. You rode your bike or walked everywhere. You didn't get a ride to school, and I had paper routes, doing it in the dark and in the morning, and if there was a problem, no one heard or knew about it because it was a very safe time.
Yeah, awesome. What a great place to grow up. And so you go to school there, you're playing polo, you're swimming. Did you have goals or plans beyond that?
Early on, I decided I was going to do something besides go to school. And so that was my whole I wanted to go to Hawaii, but I was thinking other spots too. And I knew I was going to dabble in construction to some level, which I did. But, getting through high school with some friends, I really, to this day, have really good friends. I mean, that's one thing I do have. And we started paddling longboards and doing a lot more, not so much body surfing, but going out on kickboards and mostly diving on, just pulling through the barrel, like duck diving a kickboard, and body surfing. But those things are so much funner to body surf on. And then that's when we decided to, at 16, I think it's going into our junior year, we went over and paddled from Catalina on some borrowed lifeguard boards off the truck. And Buddy Bond was a friend of my dad's, and he was the guard then, and he's the one who brought the Catalina Classic back. But he loaned us on a Friday night 3 boards off the truck that, never meant to go more than 100 yards.
Right.
And we went over on my cousin's boat, Jimmy's boat, and with my dad and Uncle Bob. And it was like 3 a.m. He goes, "Okay, guys, we're here." And I'm like, "Oh, shit."
And this is at 16 years old.
Going into senior year, yeah.
Wow.
And it's like 3 a.m. It's like, "Can we sleep for another hour?" And he's like, and at 4, he's like, "Okay, out of the boat, let's go. Grab your food." And we're like, "Oh man, I think we bit off more than we could chew." And he's like, "There's a buoy right there, and there's the shore. Paddle up to shore and touch it and start paddling." And back then, electronics weren't as good as they are today. Like right now, you can tell exactly where you are. We didn't know where it was foggy, so when the sun came up, it was foggy, and we're just like going, "I don't know if we're going the right direction, but let's follow the boat." And like 6.5 hours in of just wondering, what the heck, how far have we gone? The fog rose just enough to see, like, what the heck is that? Is a ship? And all of a sudden it raised, and I go, "That's the Dominator," which is a 400-foot Greek freighter that crashed in the early 60s, like 61 maybe. And back then it was there. Now it's all rust on the beach and under the water. But then half of it was still sticking up, and we realized that's the Dominator. Wow, we're off by 3 or 4 miles, but it doesn't matter. It's the same distance. But he kept thinking, "Yeah, St. Peter's going to be up here pretty quick," and all of a sudden we're north, which is great. So we pushed the boards back onto the boat. My dad took them back to Huntington Harbor, where the boat came from. We swam ashore and barefooted up the hill. Somehow, I don't remember, ended up at my buddy's house in the jacuzzi drinking Gatorade, listening to Fleetwood Mac. And I remember that album, whichever one it was, the early Fleetwood Mac in '76. And to this day, every time one of those songs comes on, I'm like, I remember that,
That's so rad.
Yeah.
And so that distance you did, was that 22? Is that the 22-ish?
Probably 22 if we went straight. I think that's what it would show, because we started just north of Isthmus, and for whatever reason, probably about a mile north, he got in tight, and he goes, "There's the shore. I don't want to get any tighter. Paddle in there and touch the land, and let's go."
How cool. And like, that's rad. Like, how cool is that? Especially on the wrong boards, you didn't train for it. It's like, now we all train for it like it's a kind of like a professional sport, but you guys are like, "We're just going to go charge it, like rush it."
Yeah.
That's so cool.
I'm glad we did it.
Who'd you do it with? Remember?
Fred Harding and Jim Caldwell. Fred was amazing. They were both really fit guys. And so we just got through it, and Jim got sick at the end of it. But the coolest part was we didn't have to mess with the boards. We just pushed the boards back to the boat and swam to shore and climbed up the cliff, and distinctly remember the Gatorade and in the jacuzzi. Yeah, Fleetwood Mac was playing.
That's so great. Well, there is so much about that experience that we're going to talk about. The first crossing, how, like, I don't want to ask it right now, because we're going to definitely talk about the channel and paddling and how many times you've done it. I don't know if you don't have enough fingers and toes and hairs to count to do that, how many times you've done it. But like, there's so much about what you just talked about. Like, it's so rad. I love that story. I can't wait to go deeper in it. But I do want to keep going on, staying on you mentioned that you weren't going to go, you had no desire to go to college, is what I hear.
From the get-go, yeah. I ended up going back to take some classes just so I can get hired in the fire department. But I really knew from the get-go.
Well, let's talk about that. So you're in clearly you're a waterman if you're paddling the channel at, in high school. Were you lifeguarding at that time?
No, I had taken the test once, and I wasn't fast enough, and it was cold in Santa Monica, and I went hard, and I was like, man, that's tough. And
I find that hard to believe that you wouldn't be like. I think of anybody being a monster in the water, it would be Joe Bark.
Well, I was young and
Interesting.
weighed a lot less, and I don't know if my heart was in it. I just took it. I think
But so you didn't do guarding.
So I didn't guard.
You went straight. Was that your goal then? Was to become a firefighter at that point?
No, I went over to Hawaii and took over a friend's room while he went to Bali, and then went back the next winter, and then the next winter, and the next winter. And then I remember sitting on the beach watching some guys surf, and then this one guy was like 28. I'm like, dude, that guy's 28. I was 22. I go, I gotta do something. I gotta get a real job. So I came back home, and I was working construction in the summers. So then I worked for the big framing crew, and then some custom home builders. And I didn't know any firemen, but one guy's a year older than me. He goes, Joe, you should be a fireman. I knew, family friend. And I'm like, And then it took a couple classes at El Camino and Harbor, and became a reserve in Manhattan, which opened a lot of doors, and got hired in Redondo Beach.
How old?
I was 26, and I lived in Redondo Beach right on the water in a 500 square foot little, tiny little bachelor's place. It was awesome. And I'd paddle before work, play volleyball. It was all right there. Like, I'd ride my bike to work unless I was taking a bunch of stuff in with me.
Pretty good living.
Great living. I'd be able to dive before work, and I always had my counterparts say, hey, if I'm not here on time, we had it worked out that you're covering for me. And I never was late, but that was always in case I got a big fish, which happened once, but I made it by a few minutes.
Classic.
Get a big 48-pound white sea bass, and you come trucking in the back parking lot, and I was covered. He already said, hey, I'm covering for Joe. They'll be here soon,
Sounds like you had it pretty well worked out.
Yeah, I worked with a bunch of really good people,
I
and
bet.
everybody works together to cover for each other and help each other out.
Outstanding. Real quick on Hawaii. So were you just doing full surf turkey? You were going there, you were working construction in the summer here, going there in the winter, and just bouncing back and forth?
Yeah, and I did a lot of odd jobs over there, mostly printing T-shirts and stickers.
Oh.
Biggie and Carlos were, Don Germain and Carlos had, the names have changed so many times, and Carlos went on to stickers, and Don stayed with T-shirts and stuff like that. And I'd print at night, so, and they'd pay me, and that I did the bare minimum because I was there,
To serve.
Yeah. But I had good friends, and I'd just hang out, and I was always close. I'd walk everywhere.
Where were you living, and where were you surfing over there?
I was living right across from Sharks Cove, and every chance it was flat, I'd definitely snorkel. And I even tried to paddle a surfboard out there a few times, but a little freaked out, just, it was new
It's
to
called
me.
Sharks Cove for a reason, right?
But I never saw a shark there, but just in the back of your mind, you're by yourself on a board, you're half underwater on a narrow longboard. But if there was paddleboards there at the time that I knew of and guys to paddle with, it would have been different. But I didn't really get back into paddling until the Classic came along.
Got it. Well, let's keep going on this. So when I first met you, you were still a firefighter. I think you were like a stevedore, like a dock worker as well. Were you doing that
I was
for a bit?
casualing for a while, yeah. But it was too hard to do shaping, fire department, and take that on. I mean, I had this big dream of putting my time in, which I never could put the time in, so that's why I bailed out. But I had a bunch of friends down there, and I'd pick up the shifts, the minimum I could just to stay on the list. And then I realized, gosh, I can't do both. I can't do three things, let alone both. And I merged with the harbor patrol and the fire department merged. So I was able to know that's happening and get what I needed to become a harbor patrol. And we still respond to fires on the squad and everything, but we're on a boat. And that was just amazing. So I had 6 years on the boat at the end.
Yeah.
And
seems very fitting to have you on a boat.
yeah, it was really fun. worked with really fun people to work with, and we stayed busy, and I loved it.
Well, when I first met you, so I first paddled the Classic in '96, but I don't think I really even, and I took a couple years off thereafter because it was such a crappy year and it was so hard. In 2000 is when I really, really got back into it, and that's when I met you. But the way I remember it is, you were a firefighter, you were doing some of that dock work stuff, you were building lots and lots of boards. You had, at that time, all 4 kids? I'm not sure. So like, I was like,
all 4,
but
yeah.
I always remember, and then Scott Lincoln, one of our good mutual friends, like, he was getting up at 4 a.m. He's like, oh, I'll be up at Joe's at 5. I'll meet him at the shop at 5. I was like, what? Like, it was the number of things, what I remember is the number of things that you were doing on top of training and organizing and helping with the events. Like, I was like, how does this guy do all, like, it was informative to me going, I want to be able to do all these things. Like, how does he do it? Like, I remember always trying to figure out how you were managing all of it. And I think the answer was, I just don't sleep as much. And I use that story a lot.
You know, Scott would get up there really early, like sometimes 3:30 in the morning, and he'd already be there. Like, what time did you get here, Scott? And he's asleep behind the wheel at the gate, locked up, and I tap on his car, wake him up, and he'd come on in. And he really got up early. And I don't do that anymore. I'm a 5 o'clock person now.
Yeah, right. Did you hear that? I'm a 5 o'clock person now. Like, that's early for most people.
Well,
but if you do what, like most endurance athletes, whether you consider that or not, like the amount you've done, like if you have a family, you have a job, you got to find a time to do this stuff, and it's usually in the dark to some degree, right?
Yeah, and you get a lot of work done. I'm kind of a one-man show, so if people come in and want to talk, I'm not getting any work done. And so I can get a lot of work done early, or I can get a lot of work done before I go to the fire station at 7:30. But I never set an alarm. It's whenever you wake up, you wake up. And I'd love to be able to go till 5:30 or 6, but it just doesn't happen.
Yeah, got it. Well, hyper productive. Well, listen, we've talked around the edges of the Catalina Classic and prone paddling. Let's talk about where prone. You talked about doing it, going into your senior year, as 16 or 17 years old. You do your first channel crossing with your 2 buddies and your dad and your uncle or whatever on the boat. When did the prone paddling thing start for you beyond that?
I was working the bar. I don't know if I was a bar back or a bartender at the time at Beach Rumberts, which is a place right there in the Redondo Harbor. And a bunch of people came in. I kind of knew some of them and kind of knew the others. And there was 11 of them. It was 1982. And they were just having a great time. And they're like, we just paddled from Catalina, the Classic. And I'm like, what? Because I knew it went on in the 50s and 60s. Had no idea it was going to be brought back that year. And they're telling me about it, and I'm like, man, how did I miss that? So, shoot, within a day or 2 off that, I started building paddleboards. And
were you?
I wasn't building paddleboards until they came in 1982. I was building surfboards before that, and had the shaping room and everything. And but when they came in and 11 people crossed the channel, I was just in awe of, like, no way, it's back. And so
you were aware of it, that it had gone on back in the 50s.
Yeah.
And into the 60s, and then it stopped. Did it stop around Vietnam? Is that what I recall?
No, I want to say it might have been it's early 60s, and it may have been because of the fog. Oh. And I should know all those details, but they come and go.
So let's talk about the Classic.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to get into the details of it, but what is the Catalina Classic, Joe?
It's Isthmus Catalina to Manhattan Pier, paddler. Prone paddler, no drafting, 1 escort boat per person.
How many miles?
It's 31 to 32, depending on, sometimes 33 if you don't follow your boat right. But it's been going on so long. And then when you hear about people in the 30s, paddling.
Was Tom Blake the first one to cross it?
I think he was, and every time you feel like you're hurting out there and you realize people swam this and swim it today, it makes you feel like a wimp, like, oh shoot, I can get through it.
For sure.
Those people are amazing.
So yeah, the Classic is this thing. We're going to talk a lot about it because you're rolling. It's been incredible. It's one of my, big part of my life, and it's just something that, like, well, let me ask you this: you've done that channel a handful of times. We'll get into the numbers. What is it about paddling from Catalina Island to the mainland?
I think it's like anything. If there's a mountain, you're going to climb it, or it's right there. If that island wasn't there there's a good chance I wouldn't be paddling like I am, or I was. But that island you look at every day, and sometimes it looks like it's 5 miles away. It's amazing. Other times it looks like it's 45, 50 miles away. But if you look at the people who did it before us, they were all the pioneers of big wave surfing, and their stories are amazing. They were funny characters, and got to know some of them over the years, and they were awesome. And and then when you figure your buddy did it, you got to do it too. But that was the beginning for me. 83 is my first year.
Gotcha. So who are some of the names for the people in the surf world? I always talk about, because it's the iconic names of kind of the grandfathers of Southern California surfing, were the first ones to really do it. When they were riding bigger boards, like everything they did was a little bit more manly, it seems. But you had guys like the Greg Knowles and all these guys that I grew up hearing about, and I had a chance to meet a couple of them. But you started hearing or reading the stories about these people, the big waves and their ocean exploits, and you're like, I'm not worthy. They're amazing, right?
They were amazing, and what they did it with wooden boards, and some of them are beautiful, hollowed out, and they don't weigh much, and the design's amazing. They're like models. And I've seen some of the really nice boards, and I've seen some of the beaters that, like, how did anybody ever do that? But it's a different group of guys. If you look at the list of them, they're all the guys that, we read about or saw in the old black and white surf magazines. And I bought the Superlight boat from Roy Bream, who I think he did the entire race on his knees.
I have a crazy Roy Bream story I'll tell you in a second.
Okay, he's amazing. And I talked to him last year, or maybe a year and a half ago, but to do he had knee wells, so he couldn't lay down, and he says he only paddles on his knees, which is crazy. And then other ones had knee wells, but you could still go on your belly, and no t-shirts, and
no t-shirts. If I see somebody paddling without a shirt, I know they're relatively new to the sport, because you will be bleeding, right?
Oh yeah, you get in that shower and you're screaming.
For sure.
It hurts.
Okay, quick Roy Bream story. So Roy Bream, top 5 paddler back in the 50s. I own and operate hardware stores, and we had a store in Encinitas, right down in Cardiff area. And I started talking to one of the old guys right when we had opened the store, and we started talking surf. And then he goes, "Oh, I used to prone paddle quite a bit, and I still do some." It was Roy. Roy was working in our hardware store, and he would tell the stories. He was an original guy at Chart House, one of the guys on the Chart House thing. And he said he did it at like his 75th birthday. He went out and did the channel solo with no escort boat. He said he went over to Catalina, crazy stories. And then I start finding out who he really was. And you're like, he's on I don't know if he's on the Perpetual Trophy, which we'll talk about, but just some of these guys are just incredible stories. And women were doing some amazing stuff. So it's really, really neat when you see the who's who, the Tom Blakes and the Greg Knowles and the Ricky Griggs and all these names. If you grow up surfing, you hear about these, again, icons. So really neat. And so it starts back up in 82, and you get the bug immediately.
Yeah.
You've already paddled it once when you were younger. And this time in 82, you're a fireman and you're working at a bar.
82, right? I wasn't a fireman yet.
Oh, you weren't?
In 86, I became a fireman.
Okay.
So I was working the bar at night, and then framing crew during the day. So not much sleep at that time either, but I was maybe going to go travel again. So working 2 jobs so I can, but around 83 is when I said, okay, I got to get a real job. I'm tired of selling my truck every 6 months and starting over. And it's kind of, so 83 until 86, that's how long it took me to get hired.
Wow. But you were shaping boards, and then so you were shaping short boards.
Yeah.
Again, when I mentioned, when I started hearing about you were doing all these things, these are the other things. You were shaping boards. So you're making short boards, you pivot and you start making paddleboards, prone paddleboards as well. Talk about what that turned into, or how that started and where it went.
Yeah, I never thought I was going to make a living, or even really that paddleboard and surfboards was a job or a profession for me. It was more of, I want to build boards, and I want my friends to ride my boards, and these guys want to paddle with me, but they don't have a board. So there was no money for the first 10 years of paddleboards, because I would build them just for my buddies to paddle with me, and then they were so terrible, they didn't last more than a year or two. And I'd like to know where they are today, if they're even
Hold on, there's one out in the parking lot.
I know. Yeah, that is an old one, and they're showing up now.
Yeah. So I first did the classic in '96, but my board had been under the bellies of quite a few people before me, including my good friend Brian Lanigan, who moved down from PV with this thing on his car when I was at school in San Diego, and I'm like, what is that? And that I have that board on my car out here right now, and I did the race on it in '96. It has a long story, but I want to turn it into a wall hanger, but we were looking at it before we came in here. I mean, if you put that next to any modern board, it almost doesn't look like the same type of craft.
Totally different, but a lot of those older boards went well. I mean, Gare was on a board and he held the record 25 years, and it has a ton of rocker.
Yeah.
You know, Tim had that record for 25 years.
And we're going to talk about what happened to that record, but not yet.
Yeah, but I mean, his had a lot of rocker, and some people took it out, 'cause it's at my shop, and said, something about it, I don't know. It's not a good knee paddler. Well, Tim knee paddled it well, but there's no deep knee wells. And, you know, every board has a curve that makes it or breaks it, and everything's a trade-off, you know what I mean? Stability and speed. And,
yeah.
But, so I didn't think that a lot of these, I didn't go into the board business thinking I'm going to make a living building paddle boards and surfboards. I just wanted to ride my boards, and I wanted my friends to ride them, and pretty soon it was full-time.
Full-time.
Yeah.
Well, it's fun that you were such a test pilot for it, because you were also a very prolific racer in the Catalina Classic. So you are building boards, you're super inspired in '82, '83, and you're starting to race and make boards for yourself and for friends. Tell us about the competitive side of Joe Bark in those years.
Everybody wants to win. Everybody wants to beat their buddy. But man, I came in my first year, and it was a terrible board I built. And I learned a lot. I had never seen a paddleboard, so I didn't even know until I show up, and I'm like, man, these guys have this Velzy. It's like a missile. And it was just amazing, you know. And the guys were fast, and they were trained up, and they were disciplined about knee paddling and in their workouts and their diet. And I was more of a just lay on the board and go as hard as you can until you bonk and just keep going, you know. And over time, I kind of figured out a little bit, but I didn't get my nutrition down for 10, 15 years, you know. I still haven't, but at least I could work on the cramping, you know.
Yeah. Well, and you didn't have the access there were no power bars and gel packs, and, you know, like, we didn't have the nutrition, we didn't have the drinks. Like, it was all like Gatorade, or like, it was a very different world, even when I started, which was more than a decade after you did. So I can only imagine back then, and you go back even further into the 50s, like, they're doing it on PB&Js or whatever, right? Sardines.
Yeah, I know.
Totally different animal.
Yeah.
You won it a couple times though, my friend, right?
I got lucky a few years.
Yeah, you made your own luck and your own boards.
Yeah. I wish I had those boards today. They were belly paddlers. I don't think you could knee paddle on them. And a lot of the boards, you know, were just so bad, the ones I built. They were just crooked and narrow and tippy, but they're better than a surfboard. Yes. And there came a time when it changed to stability, and then it changed to rudders. You know, rudders were around in the 50s and 60s, but we didn't do them till around, I'm guessing, around 90, bringing them back.
Well, no, because, like, this is a question I have for you specifically. So as I said, my board is probably made in the late 80s by you, the one that's on my truck out here that I'm going to hopefully send back with you to get cleaned up and turned into a wall hanger, because that's all it's good for at this point. And it needs to have a lot of support in that wall because it's quite heavy. But there were in 1996, my first year, there was one ruddered board, and that was Buzzy Kerbox, came over from Hawaii with a Dennis Pang chambered, narrow, light, definitely not a knee paddler, and he got, I think, third in the race.
Okay.
Jeff Stoner, Dawson Jones from Hawaii also, and Buzzy. And I bought that board off the beach that day.
Oh, wow.
I wish I still had that one. But it went, like, those two boards side by side, yours at that point was already probably close to 10 years old, and this thing from Hawaii was probably 3 months old, and it had a rudder. It was the only one with a rudder. And as I mentioned, so this is the question, but I have to set it up. I took 3 years off. I didn't race again until 2000. And in 2000, I came back, and it went from the dark ages. Like, I think of like 96, the boards, as you were saying, they were crooked and heavy and no rudders. I came back 3 years later. It's all carbon. It is all rudders. They're half the weight. The pads are great. There's drink bottle mounts. I'm like, it was a whole different animal in a very short amount of time. So I've always thought of like, it was like the dark ages, because I knew there was, I mean, I've seen all the pictures since then of ruddered, hollowed, beautiful boards that you were mentioning from the 50s, but in the 90s, they were heavy and no rudders. And then I come back in 2000 and they're modern and beautiful. And I mean, your boards 3 years later were stunning. And I believe anybody could race a circa 2000 board that you made today with no problem. I mean, they were that good.
The hulls were good. The hulls of those old boards are still fast. Might not have the knee wells and the chest rise, but I learned a lot during that time talking to some people like, Mike Eaton and I talk on the phone. I remember in the rain sitting there looking out the window for hours talking to him. One day I was home from work, and everything was new to both of us. We were painting boards at the time instead of finishing them like we're finishing them. And at that time, Dale was, kind of over it because of he didn't want to work with epoxy. He called it snake foam. I don't do that stuff, and it bends on you. It's weird. And but when we started, all of a sudden, when paddling went from 11 to 18, and then 24, and then 40.
Are you talking number of people?
Number of people. You're like going, wow. I'm getting to get more serious, and if I'm going to build something, I want it to be right. Putting a lot of time and money into it, and let's get them right. And it took off. And I had several friends, that are still around that raced for quite a few years that would head to Port Escondido first day out of school, spend the whole summer in hammocks down there, and come back 2 days before the race. I'd have boards for them. They'd race. Never been on the boards before.
Sounds like Fairbrother.
Fairbro, Davey Jessup, Slade Fester, and that was their training, paddling through the rips at Porto.
Hallelujah.
And
right.
They paddled stock, and then they went to unlimiteds. But a lot of local guys, the South Bay was a melting pot for paddling. And it still is today.
Big time.
There's more paddlers out of there, men and women, old and young. And they paddle in different groups, and everybody has a group where, hey, this is close to my house. I don't even need to, or they can store it at a buddy's house, And it's nice when you got a garage and you put all your buddies' boards in there. It's cool, and you call the shots. We paddle at 5, or we paddle at 6, or the garage is locked.
Yeah. Well, and what's amazing is, and I'm jumping around a little bit, but the community, you just nailed it. Like the groups that paddle. I always say, if you run with a group or you paddle with a group, you've got a lot. Like when you're paddling for 20 miles. Or for ultimately training for the race for 32, you have a lot of time to talk. And when you're out on the water, if you're not talking, you're hurting. You're counting strokes. So like the more you can talk, you have a lot of quality time to unpack just about anything in the universe you want to talk about. But you learn a lot about people. You make a lot of really close friends. And the South Bay, I was always jealous because the South Bay, you guys had a huge crew always, and I would come up there and train. But regular days, there'd be 3 of us here for decades. It's completely changed. Talk about community. It's blown up.
Yep.
And you go out there, like I've forever. If I see somebody paddling prone, I'd paddle over and go introduce myself because there were 3 of us. Now, like it's really cool. It's amazing how many people are out there and how many channel crossing events there are. It's really, really cool. But each community, it's kind of almost becoming more like a surf club, like it's a paddle club. There's all kinds of little pockets. I know your kids are in some. It's really, really, really cool how that's evolved.
It has. You used to know every board on the coast. You saw a board, you knew exactly you owned it. Now, they're on this hill, Aventa Inn. If I'm walking my dog or if I'm just taking a drive, I'll pull over on a weekend morning. And with my binos, I can see the donkeys, packs of 5, 10, 15, 20. I can see the mermaids with them heading to the R10. I can just see random paddlers. I can see the guys at a rat. I can see the Torrance group. And you'll see 40, 45 paddlers. Incredible. On a nice Sunday 2 weeks before Catalina.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of paddlers.
It's a lot of bark boards out there.
Yeah.
I would contend 98% of those out there that you can see have your logo on it. Questions about the Classic, and we're going to get more into it. How many Catalina Classics have you done, Joe?
I finished 38.
Does that mean you didn't finish some?
I didn't finish one, and if I would have finished...
You didn't?
96.
Oh, that was my first year.
Okay, yeah.
That was no fun. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So 39 Okay, 38 completions. That's incredible. Again, 32 miles, average speed is in the 6 to 6.5 hour range for you, I would imagine, maybe 7 on some, depending on conditions. But you also seemed like you had a lot of, like when you weren't competing, you were just doing front. Like, I was like, how does Joe do this every year? It doesn't look like he's training that much. Like, was it mental? Or were you always stealth training? What were you doing?
When I wasn't training to compete, I trained enough to just get by. But I enjoyed it. It was so much funner paddling when you're not hammering. But every year I seemed to get by. One year was tougher. I didn't paddle. I think Jeff Petty did one, 0 training, because he had got really injured by a concrete truck. And I think he couldn't paddle, but he got on the board and he did it 10 hours, not one day in the water, and from a bad injury. I did it with very little training, and it was 9:17 because the diving for the white sea bass and the yellowtail and the tuna it was the best fishing and diving year ever. And
priorities.
It was 9 hours, 17 minutes, and I said, I'll never do that again. It was so painful. And it was out of EPS, it was out of polyester foam, so it was heavy.
Yeah, geez.
And you got to have the strength to get that thing up to speed to utilize any glide. And, we used to go out and try a board for 200 yards going, yep, that's the one I'm going on. Well, wrong thing to do. You can do anything for 200 yards.
Well, I always say, like, for people that don't paddle long distance, if you're a marathon runner, I would say if you run a marathon and you're not feeling well, you can call an Uber, or you can sit down on the curb, or you can just walk. But if you're not feeling well, or you're bonking, or it's snotty out there, like, you either paddle or you're a buoy. Like, there's no pulling out, like, and where a marathon, say an average marathoner is going to be somewhere in the 4, give or take, hour mark. The new record, which we'll talk about, of the Catalina Classic is 4 hours and 53 minutes. That's the record.
Yeah.
Average people, it's closer to 6 hours, 7 hours. So, and then if you do it untrained, which makes me cringe, that 9 hours. I can't tell you the last time I slept for 9 hours, let alone paddling for 9 hours. So I just want to paint a picture. It is an incredible feat to do it. It's wonderful. It's amazing. I think that's why it's so beloved, but it ain't easy.
No, and nowadays everybody's fast. Everybody's training. I can't believe these young, and maybe I'm just getting old, but everybody seems young to me, but they're probably not that young, but they seem it, and they are hammering. Like, I know that Emily'd go paddle it with Jack at 4 in the morning. And
These are 2 of your 4 kids, right?
And then he'd go to work at the fire station, and she would go meet her girls group or the other group at 6 and do it again. I'm like, man, that's overachievement. I mean, it's like amazing dedication.
Yeah.
Whereas when we trained, we never trained that hard. I mean, some guys did. The guys winning, like, I know, some guys trained really hard. They took it serious, and it was awesome. But now everybody's so fast that the slowest is fast. The slowest person out there now is fast. And because they have the cutoffs and everything, no one's going to, and they have the qualifying.
Yeah. It's gotten a lot harder sport. From when it was 11 guys or 43 guys. Now it's 150, or it's like 130, I think, this year. But you have to qualify. You have to earn your way in.
Yeah.
But at the same time, when you're in groups, as you work your way up in the group, you can go to another group that's even faster if you can earn that. But I mean, I try to be very competitive, but I was always, if I was on, I was the front of the chase pack, but I was never at the back of the elite pack. I never was. But, I remember Jamie Mitchell, who won Molokai 10 years in a row. He's like, I'm willing to put myself in the hospital to do this. Like, I wasn't willing to put myself in the hospital nor did I have the time or the inclination to train that hard. And I don't think I had the natural talent to even apply it if I had.
Yeah.
So, but that's the beauty of it, right?
I did paddle with you one year. I don't know if you remember. I think it was a yellow top, white bottom, maybe.
No, the Big Banana. That was my super rocker board. That was incredible.
Yes. Okay. Well, we paddled together one of those years. I remember, when I paddled for somebody more than a couple hours. But I remember, like, halfway in, we were there for 2-3 hours, and then you probably took off. But I remember the paddling with that yellow board, and it was. You remember those things because we talked the whole time.
Yeah.
You probably got tired of me talking and took off.
Well, as Scott Linkwood said, if you want to paddle or run with me, you have to be willing to be talked at. If I can talk, I can run. If I can talk, I can paddle. Because it changed. Like, I think it's, unless you're trying to win it, I always tell people, don't spend your time by yourself out there. Like, go find someone to talk to and turn it into like a training paddle and have a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Unless you're going to win, and nobody cares anyway. Nobody
Yeah.
cares. Unless you win it, like, winning is amazing, but if you get second or 17th, like, nobody really cares except you do. Like, everyone
Yeah.
wants to do their best, but try to make it fun. It's once a year. Try to make it memorable, right?
It's a whole different level now. It's crazy.
Yeah, well, that's awesome. But 38 times, that's incredible. Any idea how many times you've crossed that channel under your own power, paddling or?
Another 20 of the rock to rocks, including the paddle run paddles, where we paddle over. Well, there's probably 7 of those where that's 2 each time. We paddle over, run the marathon, and paddle home. But probably 25 more besides Catalina.
That's
And,
a good number.
Those were fun because we stayed together. We stopped every 2 miles and regrouped, and we paddled at like a 4 mile an hour, really mellow.
Yeah.
And we got lucky for all but the last day of coming home where it blew, and we had to leave a bunch of boards on the island.
I was with you this year.
Oh, you were.
So just to
yeah.
frame it, you're talking about the paddle, run, paddle.
Yep.
The history of this, from my perspective, was years and years ago, we heard about this guy, Grant Curry.
Grant Curry started
who
it.
was, we would hear rumors that, and Grant was a Catalina guy, paddler, but we'd hear like, did you hear what Grant did? I heard that Grant paddled over on Friday, ran the marathon, the Catalina Marathon on Saturday, and paddled back on Sunday solo. And we're like, no way, nobody could ever do that.
Without a boat.
Without a boat. And then you turned it into like a super fun event, which was, once I heard you were doing that, I was like, Joe, I got to do this. I got to do it. And it's one of the coolest things. And I did it with you a few times, but every year was different.
Yeah.
And you were talking about the one year that we paddled over, did the marathon, and then the last day, like, it was nuking.
It wouldn't have been safe for,
No.
I mean, for the boat. I mean, bringing the boats back was just hairball. We took as many boards as we can, got as many people on the boats, but just to be out there, it was like you shouldn't be out there in our boats.
For sure. For sure.
We went back over like a month later with Shakia and picked up a bunch of the boards.
Yeah.
It was oil slick glass.
Of course.
Stacked the boards high and ran probably 35 knots home.
Yeah.
It was
But for
mellow.
most people, they're going, hold on, go back. What did you guys do? I mean, it's a 22-mile paddle, but it's the way you did it, it was super social. And I always tell the story. We would stop every 5 miles, and some years there were stand-ups doing it with us. Like, it was super slow pace, super chill, because it's the off season. Nobody's really trained up.
Right, it's March, yeah.
But then the funnest part, which I have to share, is that what would we do at the halfway point? What would you do?
Have coffee or chicken, fried chicken.
Yeah. So we would stop at the midpoint. Everybody'd sit up and talk, and then they'd start passing out from the boat a bunch of buckets of Kentucky Fried Chicken. And the first time I saw it, I was like, "Hold on, what?" Like, it was so funny, and I've told that story a million times.
I think Punker might have started that.
Punker Pat Towers.
He might have.
That's so funny.
Because I would have thought of something that good. But it's funny, once a year, that's what I'm craving. I need some salt.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. Well, the other thing, we're talking food and the island. One of the other things, and this kind of leads us into community, but like, over and above you paddling the channel 38 times, you would also typically go over the day before, go spearfish, kill a bunch of fish, clean it, and then you'd cook for everybody the night before the race. So we're all over there getting there's at Buffalo Park, there at the Isthmus, everybody's getting all their gear. It's like the kickoff event, and you're there sweating bullets, cooking for 100+ people, and then you're gonna get it in the water in the morning and race. Like, I always, like, I'm not capable of doing all those things.
All that happened, but I was just the front man. Everybody else did the work. Like, guys would score a bunch of albacore or a swordfish, or we just got lucky. You know, you had Jeff Petty and Tom Allen and, you know, our families behind us that were, and then Teresa on the island. Teresa and her family would have stuff in their stoves cooking and getting heated up. But, you know, I'd be part of it, but it started with the Rock to Rock team. Everybody was a volunteer. So, like, if we had 70 paddlers the first year, we had 130 volunteers. And so it's really easy to do that when you have a team of people who volunteer to do it. And so if you look back at, you know, Clyde Legoo and all these people, you know, Jeff and Tom from the get-go they would step it up and help. And Eric Russell, all my boat guys would all, but they were paddlers too, but they would step it up and,
Well, but
it
again,
was fun.
I think that's you building that community and people wanting to help and be a part of it. You always made it super fun. And just to kind of pin it, the Rock to Rock for clarity is the shorter of the two channel crossing races, Isthmus to Palos Verdes and then to San Pedro, 22 miles versus the 32.
Yeah.
Usually, like Father's Day weekend-esque, but just a really good a good reason. I mean, we're always looking for an excuse to paddle the channel, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like if I can paddle that, hallelujah, super fun, get out there with a friend, and it's a great accomplishment, which goes back to, you had said it, like if you look at that island all the time, and it comes up in here all the time, if you look at that island all the time, when you start paddling it, when you first, like you'll never look at it the same way, and you will be very proud of like that. It's a huge accomplishment, and then you go on to do it 100 times or whatever you've done, like radical.
Yeah,
super cool.
I wish I could still do it. I'd like to still do the Rock to Rock, but Catalina's out. Mentally don't have it in me. You have to want to do it. As a kid you can wing it, but at this point you have to really want it, and that's too much for me right now.
I think you've earned the right to say that after 38 Catalina Classics. There's other races though that you've done, and again, part of the community and the fun. Like you've gone around the country doing stuff. Like who would have thought you can go paddleboard race in Chattanooga, Tennessee, right?
Oh man, I did my 10th year last year, and Ben and Kim met them at the Paddle and Paddle. They came out and did it, and we loved Ben and Kim, and now they're married. But it's 30. They say 31 miles, but our GPSs always say 32 or 3. I don't know what's wrong with us, but it's the most beautiful race. It sells out. 800 people sells out in 6 minutes on the internet. And we're going again this year, and then there's a waiting list for people dropping off. You can be on the waiting list. But it's all craft. It's every kind of canoe, kayak, stand-up, prone, and there's 150 volunteers in that race. It is so organized and so amazing. And water's going to be 70 degrees, so we're okay. It could be 28 at the start line. It could be 50 at the start line. And it's nothing to do with the ocean. And all these people come from around. They have a flag from every state and every country. It's a big, giant, big tent revival tent. Huge people. And it's like, we all know races. You get done with Catalina, you're like, I'm pretty burnt out. I got to mess with the boat. Oh, I got to do this. I'm not going to. Nobody misses that party. It is huge. Starts with the bluegrass band, all the trucks outside with different kinds of amazing food. Got the local brewery guy. It is huge, and to sell out in 6 minutes,
It's incredible.
Insane.
Yeah. What about Molokai?
I love Molokai, and that's amazing. It's more than I can do at this point. I feel for anybody going to Molokai should get there early and get used to the heat. It's amazing. If the guys that show up the night before and race it, just getting used to that heat to me is huge. But it's it's just amazing. It's not a easy downwind like you're on a downhill run. It's quartering, and the guys that train and do it right, and to stay hydrated because it is so hot is mandatory. It's just crazy. I've done it 5 times, and I'll probably be a boat guy in the next this year again with the kids. But that's an amazing race, and I hope they keep that going forever because it's insane just to be on the boat.
Yeah.
It's so rough. I'm like, man, I wouldn't want to be out here, but it's race day.
The story of it, just for, again, it comes up in here periodically, but both races we're talking about, all 3 of those, really the 32-mile range.
Yeah.
What could be more different? You've got California waters, which is one. You've got a river through Tennessee, and then you've got Molokai from Molokai to Oahu. There couldn't be 3 more different bodies of water and ways to paddle, which is going to bring me into, well, first and foremost, there's just as many bark boards doing the Molokai race. And what's really interesting is the unlimited boards, the bigger boards, you've kind of customized those to that kind of big downwind water. But your stock boards, the 12-foot boards, you've cracked some crazy code that board can win in Catalina, relatively flat, or in Molokai, which is big and wild and very, very challenging. That's like, I don't, how does that work?
We got lucky on that. We built so many 20-something years ago. Oh, shoot, this is my last shop. And we were building them, and we'd have guys check them out. Like Kyle was one of the guys, and Jack.
Kyle Daniels and
all the
Jefferson.
guys that knew it, and Grant, and they'd take these boards out and they'd write on the wall their times or their which one they liked best. And guys would make up numbers or names for each one, so we could keep track of the boards. And we labeled the boards. And something about that board, and we've tried, like guys, hey, can we tweak this? Can we tweak that? And I'm like, we can, but if I'm going to build the board and it's not right, I'll build you a new one. But if you're going to tweak it, I'm not going to take it back. 'Cause, don't reinvent the wheel. So we do little tweaks, and they're like, it's insane, but not as good as the original. And so we just keep messing with that and tweaking little things, but that board just
magic.
It works.
It's incredible.
It works.
I have a question about. We're going to talk about bark boards real quick, but you had a board model. It was one of the hand-shaped, custom-shaped stock boards, so 12 foot, and it was called the CT. What did the CT stand for?
Kyle named it CT, and then he called it college tuition.
That's what.
He goes, that's going to pay your college tuition, and that is the Commander that Surf Tech builds for me, which is state of the art, and then our customs are the CTs. And Kyle named it that. We didn't name it that. And I've kind of told people that's not what it means, but that's what Kyle named it, because he'd been on every stock board and won Catalina on the stock boards, and he's like, this board, there's nothing like it. And we've tried bettering it, but there's something that it's going to take us longer to better
Joe,
it.
I've had a lot of boards from you, and I've had quite a few stock boards. This is getting total nerd. The wide-tail blue Commander.
Yep.
I didn't like stock paddling for me ever until I got that board. I love that. So yeah, you figured it, and it works in all conditions. Like, I don't know how you did it. There's something secret. There's something going on in there, but magic. And so, but really from a like, I love the story about everybody was testing it and giving you all the the references and the times, and you had fake names and people like. That's what I remember. You would always be like, people would be taking the boards and test driving and giving you feedback and tweaks, and you figured it out. It's really amazing.
We got lucky with that board for sure.
There's no luck. This is when you shape, I don't know, hundreds of boards to get to one, there isn't luck. And you've got the best guys in the world paddling them and telling you what they think. That's not luck. It's a lot of good work. How many prone paddleboards, not surfboards, you got into stand-up when it was early and big. How many prone boards do you think you've made?
I don't know. Every year I put the book away and I start a new book for each year. And a lot of it is records and phone numbers and like little tweaks on, lower the footwell or the knee well. So I've got probably the last 20 years in the logs, but I put that away and I start a new one. So one day I'll put them all into one, but I don't know. Shoot, we can.
I mean, it's got to be for all those years. And so let's talk about this. Like, I'll say it, you probably wouldn't, as humble as you are. Without Joe Bark making boards for the last 40 years, I don't know if there would be a sport. There are always other people making some boards, little samples here, little bits there. But for all those years, 90+% of every Catalina Classic, every Molokai, is Joe Bark boards. And I mean, you're the celebrity in it because your name's on almost everybody's board. If you've paddled prone, you know Joe Bark. And it's almost been like a one-man, it's not at all, but it's almost like a one-man sport. Like, you've been the innovator within the sport. You've been the community in there. You've been racing it. Again, you're super engaging with everybody that comes around to be part of it and like inviting people into the space. It's almost synonymous, prone paddling and Joe Bark. And it's great that other people are doing other things too to keep expanding it, because it really is. But if somebody wants to race and be super competitive, they're calling you.
I love that. But somebody would have filled my shoes if I would have bailed out or moved out of the country or something, because I know a lot of really good craftsmen who are friends of mine that said, why would anybody try to take over when it's, I'm so far behind. I'll just get a board from you, Joe. I don't even want to build one, even though I know they could build an insane one. But the thing about us, we're a small team. There's only 3 of us, plus my kids. We got the best glassers. And to glass that foam, people are figuring it out now. But 20 years ago, you couldn't find anybody who wanted to touch it. They were melting boards. It wasn't like it is today. But, you know, you got really good guys glassing your boards. Romeo and Miguel now, two of them, are doing all this work, and they're perfectionists. They are so good. So without them, it'd be different. And even the rudder system, Mike Bastash, he's passed 2 years ago, but he built my rudders from day one, each generation of rudder. He's a genius. He's an engineer in a big company, and he could machine, you know, he was the engineer for UBE, and we bartered everything. It's like, hey, Mike, you know, he goes, okay, yeah, I need a couple boards for Christmas. I need some rudders and the parts. And those stay, my biggest fear is a guy comes across the world to race Molokai and the rudder breaks. And so everything I'm building now is overkill strong. I'm not worried about a couple extra ounces, but strength, durability is everything. And you know how it is. You try to get your board shipped to here, it's going to get beat up. You try to get it to Molokai, it's going to get beat up. A good padded bag with cardboard and spare rudder parts. And that's the big thing that I need to get to Molokai with a bucket full of spare parts for the rudder, because they take their rudders across when they ship. And then on that lawn, they drop a part. And you can't go to the hardware store and buy a weird part because everything's customized. So I figured Catalina next year, I'll do the same thing. I will bring over spare parts, which I always do, but I'll make it known. I'll be under a tent, you know, patching a ding real quick, although a sticker works better than anything when you're in a hurry. But we have a good team. Yeah,
amazing. And they are both, you know, super high tech and all carbon, and I mean, super light and super, yeah, they're incredible. And your guys you all do incredible work on those. But you mentioned it. You kind of talked about the legacy of it and what happens next. Like, what is the post-Joe bark boards? Like, because I know your kids are doing some stuff in that space.
Oh, yeah, they've been working in there for a long time. And surfboards, paddleboards, and Jack gets his orders from his friends now, and Emily's getting orders on her surfboards. And she still wants to do it hand shape. I'm like, Emily, get on the machine. Your hands and lungs don't want to waste time anymore. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's like, you know, like guys, oh, it's not cool, it's not soulful. I'm like, well, every guitar neck is machined. Every V8 motor is punched out by machines, you know. It's like, I want it to be right, and the rocker's right, the knee wells are right. As you go, hey, I tried John's board, I want the same board. It's gonna be the same. Whereas when I used to do them by hand, that stuff moves on you when you cut it out with a beam saw, and it just, you can watch it in the heat just bend and tweak. It's like, you want to get it done right and get it glassed, you know, and try to get the glassing done when it's Santa Ana winds, you know, so it's really hot, and you save a pound just on having the epoxy just like water. It's awesome. You don't want to do it when it's snowing outside.
See, this is all like the nuance that nobody would think of unless you're like a master craftsman and have worked with it for decades. Because I'm like, oh, does humidity have an impact on curing? Like, I don't know. I guess so, right? Like, these are the things that when people order a board from you, this is what they rely on you to be the master, and you're going to take all those things into account to get them the best board that they leave with, right?
Yeah, we try to do the laminations. You know, Miguel does the laminations, and he loves it when it's hot. It's hot and it's a nightmare. You're sweating to death, but the epoxy is so easy to work with. You're not putting an extra pound on. And, you know, Miguel and Romeo, they know exactly what they want. They do it right. There's, you know, their way or the highway, but the boards are perfect.
Yeah, for sure. Well, listen, that brings us, we were talking about 2 of your kids that are making boards of your 4, but let's talk family, because one of the other things, if anybody knows Joe Bark, big time family man. And that's what I said earlier, like, you were doing all these things and still being a father of 4 and happily married. And talk about your family a little bit.
30, 31, I don't know, 33, 31, 27, 25, 2 boys, 2 girls. Amy is 5 years younger than me. She's got more energy to take care of the kids, but she did such a good job with them. We homeschooled them each one of them for a year, which was awesome. A really good bond there. When I was growing up, nobody did anything around the Catalina. It was like relatives, family party, family get-togethers, weddings. They're like, hey, when's Joe's race this year? When's Joe? Everybody was about the race.
Oh. You got a huge built-in family support. Everybody was all about it. Okay.
It was about the race. don't step on that date, and same to this day. Amy's like, when's the date? When's the date? She's very generous on that. Kids doing the same thing, oh, when's the race? When I plan to be back in town, and they've all raced it. Yeah, Sam raced it this year. Gemma did about 5 years ago. So all 4 kids have raced. And Sam's going to come back and do it again next year. And he's shaping as well. He does his own, when he gets, he goes away for long periods of time at sea on ships, container ships. So he can go away for 4 months. And when he comes back, he only wants to surf and play guitar. But then all of a sudden he works back into, hey, okay, I'll shape for a while. But they've worked in the shop for years. Roughing out stuff for me, cutting stuff for me, helping me with everything. And it takes a lot. Like right now, they're so busy, they haven't been in recently, and I notice it. It's just killing me. And they take a lot of heat off of me to get, rough out stuff that I don't need to do. But the family's all about the paddling. Paddling's social. You can talk. When we're running, you can't talk. When you're paddling, you can still talk. I don't know why. Even though you're paddling hard, you can still socialize and heckle each other and, have a good time. But, they've started the South Bay Paddle Group, and they got like 25 people. They go straight to coffee afterwards. They're awesome.
So great.
So it's neat to see the futures there.
Well, it's so neat that you've had the family, you've had the kids all working in the shop with you and helping you out, and they're passionate about it, still doing it. Both Jack and Emily are shaping boards, and like that's so cool. Like my kids are amazing, but none of them want to work in the hardware stores. I mean, my son did for a while. He's like, I'm over it. Like, it's how cool that must be to have them in there with you and learning from you, and not just being a dad, but like a mentor and a buddy, and like go paddle with. And I mean, I can only imagine how much they look up to you after all you've done. Like, I believe parenting, a lot of it is osmosis. It's not just what you say, it's what you do. Well, look at all the things Joe's done and with Amy, and like, it's just really cool. And I can't imagine how proud you are of them, but also how proud they are of you. But that brings me to the proud dad, proud parents moment that just transpired this summer. Okay. So we've talked a lot about the Catalina Classic. This was, I think, the 47th running in 2024. And you had 3 of your kids do it. So you had Jack and Emily and Sam.
Yeah.
Tell us about your day. And you were on the escort boat for...
I was Emily's escort boat.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to turn it over to you. Tell us about that day for the Bark family.
You know how Catalina is so stressful in the morning. It's dark, your windows are fogged up, and you're trying to get to the pier, and you can't see what's going on in front of you. There's paddlers hauling ass in there, and there's boats without their lights on, and someone's boat won't start, and their prop wrapped a mooring line. And I made it to the pier, and I snuck into a spot and...
So you're on your boat.
So I'm on my
coming
boat,
in. Okay.
and so I'm set. And now Emily said, I put all our tents and everything on the pier, and I'm like walking by, is this your stuff? Is this your stuff? Well, I'm not going to steal someone's stuff. And finally I go, okay, I found something that with her name on it. Put everything in my boat, and I'm watching everything go on, and it's poor guys are just freaking. They can't find their boat. They can't, they're late. They're just trying to get to the starting line. And Emily was set. She slept on the beach, and she has her best friend, Claire, shot the starting line. My nephew Slater had 5 photographers out there shooting the whole race. And so she shot the starting line for him, and then came up, and we work our way through the boats getting out there. And,
so I'm going to stop you for a second. So just to paint a picture of the race, it leaves the Isthmus of Catalina at 6 a.m. The gun goes off.
Yeah.
100+ paddlers all lined up on the beach, and you have to, when the gun goes off, everybody shoots out through the moorings.
Yeah.
And getting ready for that, I would contend that the logistics behind the Catalina Classic, getting a boat, getting over there, sleeping, where am I going to sleep? What am I going to get? What are the conditions? It's harder than the paddle itself. Often.
Oh yeah.
It is so you were talking about being in the boat and all that's what it is. It's not chaos, but it is high anxiety, stressful. It is, and all the while you're going, please be good conditions, please be, because it can be the difference between a hard day and a terrible day.
Oh yeah.
Right? So, okay, so the gun goes off. You've made your way out on your boat. It's still dark, and you have to identify your paddler amongst 130 paddlers this year.
Yeah.
Start back in there.
So I sneak. I don't want to wake people, so I go way around everybody and run out about 2 miles and stop dead in the water, so there's no wake. I go, way around everybody. So now I start seeing the paddlers coming, 10 minutes into it. And now it's light enough to where you can see what's going on. And I just try to get right in front of everybody and shoot photos.
Oh.
So I shoot everybody. And then I let everybody go by.
Hold on, let's stop there. I'm gonna do this all the way through because I know enough of the story. Who was the first paddler that you saw?
That was Jack.
Your son Jack.
Yeah.
Where was he compared to the rest of the field? You recall?
Maybe when I saw him, he was a couple hundred yards.
Which is a lot when you're going out with the elite pack.
yeah.
As fast as you can go, to have a gap like that is very, very uncommon for the guys at the front.
He just had a different stroke going. I mean, I just knew. I've never seen him paddle like that, and I haven't really seen him paddle. I've been on the boat for the R10 race, so I got to see him. But he had built a couple new boards at the end, and even one right down to the end. Got it in the water a couple days before the race, and don't ever switch boards at the last minute.
Sure.
But he says, him and Lockie went back, and he goes, "It's the same board, but I figure I might be giving up a little bit of glide, but in the last 10 miles, it's going to be the right board."
A little bit more stability, comfort.
Yes. And then Emily, I got a board done for her 2 days. And I go, "Hey, these are just backups, Emily, because you got your magic board. You like it. But if it flies off the boat or the car, I need to have a backup for you. So I'm going to build one for you." And so we were there with Guy Perry and his family, and we were testing in the harbor back and forth with Jack and all his crew, and everybody's testing them. And everybody's like, "Gosh, you shouldn't switch boards this late in the game." So the next day I go, I'm going to the island early. "Which board do you want me to take?" And she goes, "Give me 5 minutes," and then "Give me 5 more minutes." And then she says, "Go with the green one." And she loves it. And
Was that the new one?
the new one.
Oh.
And
And did Jack paddle his new
he
one? So
paddled
they
his new
both
one.
broke the rules
yeah,
and some other things too.
yeah. But it is a bummer for someone to get a ding that's not salvageable on the island. And I've always taken extra boards over there for an emergency,
For somebody.
somebody.
Yeah. Got it.
And I've seen Keith Minimuch's boat get smushed between two boats before his
Yep.
board. And it's terrible. You train your whole year, and all of a sudden something happens. So we could have found a board, but if you're taking it so serious, you want the right board. But
So you see Jack
I see
out
Jack.
first. Then what do you see? Or you said you shot everybody and then you took off.
Yeah, then I took off again and did the same thing, went way out around, and I stopped about a mile ahead. And so there's no wake, and they came by again, and I shot photos again, and that was the last time I was going to see him in the race because it spread out so much. And then I went back to kind of help people find boats because a lot of people still couldn't find their boats. For your first time, it's really hard to find a boat because you don't know what your paddler is going to be a mile back or. So once I got Emily established and I knew which boat she was with, I went back to help a couple people find their boats because their boats were at the other end of the line. They had no idea.
So for clarity, it's a 1-to-1 ratio. Every single paddler in the Catalina Classic has to have their own escort boat.
Correct.
And that escort boat's going to be there. Sometimes it will help with the path, but at minimum, it's there for safety and nutrition and hydration. But everybody has to have their own boat. But if you can imagine, you're taking off at 6 a.m. with 130 people. That means there's 130 boats, and you're looking for a speck on the water and go, "Oh, there's my person." Super hard to find early in the morning. And you want to find them because they may need help or may need nutrition, but you don't want to go hunting for them. So you helped navigate that. Good for you, as always.
That's the hardest part. Once everybody, and you're on the radio, and it's like, "I'm looking for a paddler. What color board? What color?" And I'm just thinking, "Oh man, I'm lucky. I got everybody fixed that I need to get fixed." But then I just shot photos along the way. I would step outside and move back up the line and shoot more photos. And I shot the whole race. And paddling's kind of boring to shoot, but there's those moments when you just get like the sunrise that you've seen is amazing. Or you might get that school of porpoise jumping over you, or you might get a mola that jumps right next to you. Or we had marlin one year that all for an hour, marlin were just, you thought you were going to get speared, they're just jumping around you. And so every once in a while, a cool shot comes out of a boring paddle race.
Funny.
And I still had service, and I called And Emily was battling with a couple people, Liz and Mike Murphy's daughter, Finley, and then another girl and another guy. And then I went up, stopped ahead, and got on the phone. I was talking, and Claire, who's Emily's best friend on my boat, was punching in to see where people were. But sometimes it didn't reset itself. So you're like, what? What's going on?
Yeah, so we have the boards, all the paddlers have a little device, but
chip.
there's a dead zone in the middle, and
Yeah.
it's not always perfect. So I'm sorry, go on.
No. So anyways, I get on the line with Addison and
With Ryan.
R.A., everybody knows R.A. He's one of a kind, awesome guy, but Jack wanted him to be his coach, because he's paddled it and won it and battled it. So you really want someone on there who knows what to say, and when not to say things, but to hammer you. Don't let him rest, but but R.A. gets on the phone and says, Jack's pulled the lead. He's like a half mile ahead, and I'm thinking, half mile ahead? That's crazy, because you got Max, one of the best paddlers ever, and you have Robert, and you have Scott, and Alex. There's so many paddlers there that.
And Max, you mentioned Max First has won it 5 times. I think this is his 14th. He's a monster, and Jack has a half mile on him. Like, it's hard to fathom.
Yeah,
right?
And I remember when Max came in, he was 18. He was the most humble, nice kid, and he still is today.
Yeah, he still is today, for
Still
sure.
is. He's like part of the family. He's one of those guys that you just love. But it was just all day, phone calls. People from land. Amy's calling me, what's going on? Because we had a couple chips right in our group that weren't right. And so I'm like, no, I got eyes on them. I see what's happening. Don't worry about the chip. This is what's going on. And at the end of the race, they said Jack's on course for a record. And with R.A., if he's going to get it, R.A.'s the guy to have hammering, with him on the boat. And he had a good straight line. And then I heard they got the record. I was just kind of hadn't sunk in yet, because I'm still with Emily.
So it's, first and foremost, huge congrats to Jack, because tell the history of that record had held for how long?
I think 25 years, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And Tim Gare, when he broke at 5:02, no one's touched it. Guys have come close. Max did once. But, Tim was one of the most natural. Doesn't even look like he's trying. He was so graceful in his paddling. And he was just such a, amazing swimmer and paddler that I thought, man, that's going to stay forever, And it's going to take the right board, the right guy, wake up on the right side of the bed, and the right day to break the record. Yeah. But Jack did his homework, and I wasn't worried about the win. He was worried about the record,
Yeah. But to break, that 5-hour mark, again, that's how long. The fastest in history is just under 5 hours now. That's how long for anybody thinking like, it's to go at the pace he did it is a slow sport. But he wasn't going, he was, in our sport, that is incredibly fast. It's hard to fathom it. I would have been, probably a solid hour behind him had I done it this year.
Yeah, it's just, he trained for, he always said, one day I'm going to train for this and win it. But he started doing it, and I just knew about it. He didn't talk about it, but watching his stroke was amazing. I've never seen it from him, and it was just amazing. And I go, well, I won't see him till the end of the race. I can just hear about it on the radio. But people were calling me from the boats, all people on shore. The safety boats were calling me, and
it's a huge deal. So congratulations, Dad. What an amazing thing. And there's so much incredible footage on Instagram and other places of his finish, standing on his board, black and white. Like, there's so many great, and we'll share that in this, but it's been a huge deal, but we're not done. So let's go to point 2 on this, or 2.0. What else happened that day?
So Emily was racing for second because Liz is so fast. And I think Liz won the last 4 maybe races. She's so fast. And we like Liz. She's so good. And so Emily would just go, I'm just fighting for second. But they were all even around 10, 12 miles. And I didn't think that was Liz. I go, is that Liz? And I go, it looks like her, but it doesn't look like her. I didn't know what boat she had. And so I'm watching, then Liz pulled ahead. And Emily was paddling with Finley. They were just close talking to each other. They could have held hands. They were just talking, story, and they were stoked and pushing each other. And there's some other fast girls out there, but I didn't know where they were. They could have been to the side, or we don't know. And so I never talked to Emily about where they might be. You know, we just kept, she'd come up to get nutrition. And from day one when I escorted Emily, I go, hey, remember, the escort guy is out there. You be kind to him. Because I've seen guys yell at their escort boat, you know.
Doesn't go over well.
Yeah, and so she's really amazing, you know, graceful, not yelling at the escort. So finally, looks like we're going to go for second. And we're at the harbor, at the Redondo Harbor, at the beginning of it. So there's a good 3 miles, a little more. And
so we're talking 29 miles into a 32-mile race. You're probably already coming up on 6 hours, 5:45, or somewhere around there where they are. So they're hammering across this whole channel, and there's 3 miles to go, and it gets tight.
Well, it wasn't. Liz was like 250 yards ahead, maybe 300, and Emily's still strong, but Emily's a finisher, and I saw Liz get a really nice bump, like this wake out of nowhere, and I'm like, oh no, but she fell. And I'm like, wow, there's bumps in here, you know, and I'm watching Emily, like 3 strokes, you know, glide. And I'm like, Emily, every bump is 10 yards, 50 bumps, and it's your race. And next thing you know, it was downwind, or they were catching bumps. Which
is incredible for the last 10 miles of the Classic. It's very uncommon.
Yeah, she was getting these bumps, quartering them, and then she was 150 yards, and then 100 yards. I'm like, well, it's going to
And you're right there in the boat.
Oh,
You're right there
I'm
watching
right there
this all go
her.
down.
Yeah, we're yelling at her. Their boat starts yelling at Liz, and we're 100 yards. And then it's 50 yards. And the whole time I'm thinking, at least we'll get close. And then it got closer, and then we had to go around the boats at the end. There were so many boats, you know, so I go around the boats, and we're looking between boats as we're going. And I'm like, she was 3 board lengths behind when I lost sight of her, and we come through the boats, and she's ahead, and the race is over. But I don't know where the buoy was. I couldn't see it. And so it was like 10 minutes to hear who won. Everybody's calling me, and I go, I can't see.
Photo finish.
And everybody's calling me, photo finish. And it was just amazing. And, you know, just so stoked. It really hadn't even sunk in yet, because it's, you know.
When did you find out that she got it?
About 10 minutes in.
It took that long?
Yeah, they announced on the radio.
Oh, my goodness.
I think 1.3 seconds in a Catalina race.
In a 32-mile race across the ocean with no course. Think about this. A marathon, everybody's running in that same street.
Yeah.
You can be up or downwind, a mile apart. You might not see people until the last mile when you're converging on the finish at Manhattan Beach Pier. And to be within 1.13 seconds, it's hard to fathom.
And it was just, I still really can't even believe it, you know. And just to see her bump riding skills, you know, she was catching these bumps, and we couldn't believe it. And we're all waiting, and people are calling me, and they go, we got the shots. I'm like, well, what's going on in 10 minutes of, but, you know, Liz is such an amazing paddler and an amazing friend. And, you know, her and Emily are friends. And Jack and Max are best friends. So it's just so stoked for the kids. But I love the second place people too, you know. And then I just kind of backed out because there were so many boats. I just had to move out a little bit, you know, so I could kind of move around because there's so many boats in there tight. So I moved out, and they go, Joe, let's have a beer, celebrate. I'm like, I got to get out of here. Let's move out 100 yards where there's no boats, because it got cramped. And I saw Sam coming in, and I'm like.
So Sam, your son?
Yeah, Sam came in and just cruising in, you know. He just is a cruiser, and like no matter what he does, he just cruises. And I'm like, how was it? He goes, oh, it was fun. I go, fun? Was it cool? He goes, yeah, I think next year I'm going to try.
Yeah.
You know, because he is a good paddler. He's done the rock to rock since he was a little kid so many times. I think he burned out on paddling, but decided, I want to join Emily's group because it's fun, and I like having coffee afterwards.
Well, let's recap this. I mean, it's incredible. So congratulations to the Bark family, because of the 3 of the 4 kids raced.
Yeah.
2 of them won their categories, and there's only 3 categories in this race. There's unlimited men, stock men and then women.
Yeah.
And Emily takes the women's, Jack takes unlimited men, and then your stepson, Lockie Lansdowne from Australia, doesn't only take the record also for stock, he wins it, and he beats his own record that he had set a couple years ago. So you've got a first place with Jack and the record after 25 years. You've got Emily, her first win, and you've got Lockie sets a record and wins.
Yeah.
Of course they're all in, I mean, again, so huge congrats to your family, to all your friends, to all their friends, setting the record, watching Emily, like being out there to watch this all happen has got to be amazing as a dad. And then again, seeing probably 120 of 130 boards have your name on it is pretty incredible as well.
That, that is neat. It really is cool.
So let me ask you this. There is a perpetual trophy, and the top 2 people from each class that I just described each year go on this perpetual trophy. How many bark names are on that? How many times is there a bark name on that perpetual trophy now?
I don't know.
It'll be fun to find out. There's probably a dozen or so on there now. Between
I don't know.
Yours, Jack's. Doesn't matter. Super cool though.
Yeah.
Super duper cool.
Yeah. Everything came together.
Yeah.
Just the whole conditions, but to have the sport get some good eyes on it. I mean, it's always been, hey, we're trying to get a sponsor from a snow cone company to give us a snow, to get, Florence behind paddling, because they're paddling on their lunch break down here. And then, they raced Molokai a couple years ago, and it's like, to have that brings the sport to another level.
Yeah.
That the sponsorship is huge, and their interest, and they're bringing so many eyes to it. And so many people are like, I've always wanted to do that, and now that my buddy did it, I get that right now. This next month is all guys going, I've always wanted to do it, and I saw it, and I got to order a board right now, and they do.
Yeah. Well, it's amazing. And again, I think we talked about this earlier. The last time there was a huge focus was Surfer's Journal back in the 90s, and the next year it blew it up. Right now, I would say it feels the same between the success and the records of Jack and Lockie and Emily, the storylines around it, which you just shared, Florence's engagement in this, all of the online, like there's so much noise, positive, rad noise around it right now. My suspicion is next year there's going to be a lot more people, which means the qualifications are going to get even tougher, which is good. Kids continues to raise the bar. And what's fun here in Newport, as you know, we have the Ben Carlson fundraising paddle. That we have 100, probably 110 people paddling the channel, fundraising. This is in a couple weeks. It's in September. Again, for all the reasons we talked about, it's seeing that island for all these years. There are lots of lifeguards involved, surfers that have been staring at it, and they're doing it for a really good cause. There's so much good that comes out of that channel, and the paddling and the camaraderie and the community and all the stuff that you're talking about. It's just so cool. But what an incredible story and accomplishment, and just proud Bark family moment. Like, incredible. Congrats.
It still hasn't sunk in. I mean, every morning I wake up and I'm like, really? And I wish I could have seen Jack, but the photos are amazing.
Oh,
that
they're
photo
amazing.
Standing up is like, that is such a unique photo. No matter whether you like the sport or not, it's a great photo.
Let's tell people. So they can find that at, I think your Instagram is a good area to find it. Is that at Barkboards? I think so. I'll make sure
it is.
And then barkboards.com is your website, which has a great blog on there, pictures of all the boards, the whole Bark history story, Catalina Classic history. Catalina Classic paddleboardrace.com, I'll put it in there, is another great one that'll capture all of this. There's stories about this whole thing. Again, it's a incredible, again, your story is just amazing. I recommend that anybody go out there and read about it. If you have any curiosity in doing it or learning more about it, those websites and those Instagram feeds are incredible, especially right now. They're so full of all this stuff. Florence Marine X, which is John Florence with Bob Hurley's engagement, and the whole Hurley family have really shined a light on prone, as you were talking about. They're really engaged down here and up and down the coast. And it's really exciting to see all this attention. Again, from when it was 11 people doing the classic back in your day, I think there was 45 the first time I did it. there used to be 3 of us, me, Scott Lincoln, and maybe Keith Minimitsu paddling here for a decade. There was nobody. So to see it this big now and to see bark boards everywhere, it's really, really cool.
Well, hopefully it keeps growing. You know, it's a unique sport. It's the only sport I really know that everybody is welcome, because it's not a wave, it's not a chairlift, it's not, you know, it's just a sport that more the merrier.
And
very social.
Very social, no ego. I always say that people that win it are probably the most humble and really try to redirect on everybody else. On all, like I promised, whether it was Jack or Max or Tim Gare, any of the people before him, they're up there recognizing everybody else. It's one of the wonderful things I always tell people. If you do the race, you gotta go to the after party. Don't get back on your boat and go home. Like, you gotta go, because it's so iconic, and that's always the energy that's left at that party after the race.
Yeah, you know, the guys that brought it back on, like Gibby Gibson, Weldon, he paddled in the 60s. And a lot of people didn't know that. You know, he's passed on, but he ran the Catalina with Buddy all these years. Buddy's done it at least twice. All the people, you know, Fairbrother, I think this year he kind of turned it over to the other guys. That's a new group. But all those people put all those years in, you know, Tom and Jeff building the trophies and all the different people to make that happen all these years. And they still were there on a boat or at the finish line. It's not going to die.
No, not even close. Joe, I'm so grateful you came in and shared your story. I promise, as I said to you, the goal is I want people to learn something about you, even if they know you well, learn something they didn't know. I guarantee they did, but even more, like hearing the story about the evolution of bark boards and your role in it and how it all happened, and kind of culminating with what just happened in the Catalina Classic with your kids. What an awesome story.
Yeah, I've been really blessed.
Yeah, likewise. Well, listen, keep doing the great work. Thank you for being an icon in the sport and really being a catalyst for the community. It's been rad. Really grateful.
Right on.
Thanks, buddy.
Right on, Mark. Thank you for
Thanks,
having
Joe.
me.
You got it.